The central hive structure towered above them like a monument to horror. It pulsed with bioluminescent light, veins of sickly green running through organic walls that seemed to breathe. The smell was overwhelming here, even through their filters. The ground itself moved with the heartbeat of the structure, and Morrison could hear sounds that his mind tried to interpret as screaming. The node is definitely in there, Chen confirmed, her scanner painting the interior in thermal layers. It is deep, maybe 50 meters underground. The Vrexians built this structure over and around it. How many hostiles between us and the target? Sensors are having trouble with all the organic matter, but I am reading at least 200 signatures. Could be more. She paused, checking another reading. Jake, there is something else. The node is larger than we thought, and it is old. I mean, really old. This hive mind has been traveling the galaxy for a very long time. Morrison processed this. How do we kill it? Chen pulled out a device from her pack. It looked like a standard EMP grenade, but she had modified it extensively during the journey. This should disrupt the neural pathways that hold the hive mind together. But I need to be within 10 meters of the core to be sure it works, and someone needs to stay with it for at least 2 minutes to make sure it fully activates. They both knew what that meant. 2 minutes in the heart of the hive while every Vrexian warrior converged on their position. It was a death sentence. We will figure that out when we get there, Morrison said, though they both knew there was nothing to figure out. Someone would have to stay behind. They entered the structure through a membrane that parted like flesh. Inside was worse than outside. The walls were alive, covered in polyps and growths that tracked their movement. The air was thick with spores that their filters could barely handle. And everywhere there was the sound of the hive. Not just noise, but something that tried to push into their minds. It is trying to communicate, Chen said, her voice strained. The hive mind is reaching out, trying to understand us. Morrison felt it too, pressure against his thoughts, alien intelligence pressing at the edges of his consciousness. Images flashed through his mind. Other species the swarm had consumed, worlds that had fallen, civilizations that had become part of the collective. But there was confusion there too. The hive mind had consumed thousands of species over countless years. It understood fear, understood survival, understood the desire to continue existing. What it did not understand was what it found in the human minds before it. Humans were afraid. That fear was real and deep, but they moved forward anyway. They chose to face death rather than abandon others. They sacrificed themselves for those they had never met. The logic made no sense to a hive mind built on pure survival. Keep moving, Morrison ordered, pushing back against the mental intrusion. Do not let it in your head. They descended through the organic corridors, fighting Vrexian warriors that came in waves. Morrison's rifle fired continuously, the sound echoing through the fleshy halls. Chen handled her weapon with equal skill, dropping warriors with precise shots while still monitoring her scanner. The structure seemed endless. Corridors that twisted back on themselves, chambers filled with biomass that might have been storage or might have been something worse, and always the warriors coming at them, relentless and coordinated. Morrison's armor was taking damage. Warning lights flickered on his display. His ammunition was running low. But they were close now. Chen's scanner showed the node just ahead, beyond one more chamber. They entered the chamber together and stopped. The node was beautiful in a terrible way. It hung suspended in the center of the room, a massive organic structure that pulsed with light. Tendrils ran from it in all directions, disappearing into the walls. This was the brain of the swarm, the intelligence that had consumed so many worlds, and it was protected by at least 100 Vrexian warriors. We cannot fight through that many, Chen said quietly. Morrison looked at the situation, calculating angles and possibilities. She was right. Even if they used every round they had left, they would not make it to the node. They needed a different approach. There, he pointed to a section of wall where the support structure looked weakest. If we bring that down, it will create a barrier between us and most of the warriors. We only need 2 minutes, Chen nodded. She set charges on the indicated section while Morrison held off the first wave of warriors. When she was ready, they moved to the far side of the chamber. The charges detonated, and tons of organic matter collapsed, creating exactly the barrier Morrison had predicted. It bought them time. Not much, but enough. They ran for the node with Chen preparing her modified EMP. Warriors clawed at the barrier behind them. More were coming from other directions. They had seconds. Chen reached the node and activated the device. It pulsed with blue light and the node reacted immediately. The bioluminescence flickered. The pulsing became erratic. All around them, the warriors stopped coordinating and began moving randomly. "It is working," Chen said, "but I need to stay here for 2 minutes. The device needs time to fully disrupt the neural pathways." "Then we both stay," Morrison replied, positioning himself between her and the approaching warriors. "No." Chen's voice was calm, final. "Jake, listen to me. I was exposed to something on my last mission. Radiation from a damaged reactor we were securing. The medics gave me 6 months, maybe a year. Every day since has been borrowed time." Morrison turned to look at her. "Amy, no." "Yes," she smiled behind her helmet visor. "I'm not running anymore. And this matters. These people we saved, they need someone to make sure they get home. The galaxy needs someone to tell them what happened here. That is you, Captain. I am not leaving you. You are not leaving me. You are completing the mission. That is what we do." She drew her sidearm and checked the charge. "Now go, I can hold them for 2 minutes. After that, this whole structure comes down." Morrison felt something break inside his chest. But he was a soldier, and soldiers made impossible choices. "You were the best of us, Amy." "No, Jake, we all are. That is what makes us human. Now go save the galaxy." He ran. Every step felt like betrayal, but he ran because that was what she asked him to do. Behind him, he heard her weapon firing, heard her counting down the seconds calmly over the team channel. 2 minutes, 120 seconds. "We can do this." Morrison burst out of the hive structure as the warriors inside regained enough coordination to pursue him. He ran through the corrupted landscape, his armor systems failing, his body exhausted beyond measure. But he kept moving because Amy was buying him this chance with her life. 90 seconds. "They are getting closer, but I have plenty of ammunition." Overhead, a dropship broke through the clouds. The rest of Shadow 7 had called for extraction as soon as they got the survivors to safety. They had come back for their captain. 60 seconds. "The node is definitely dying. You should see the reaction when this goes off." Morrison reached the extraction point. The dropship descended and Kyle Brooks was already hanging out of the door, reaching down to pull him up. "Amy," Brooks asked, but he already knew the answer from Morrison's face. 30 seconds. "Tell my family I love them. Tell them I did something that mattered." Morrison collapsed into the dropship as it lifted. Through the open door, he could see the central hive structure in the distance, still pulsing with that sickly light. 10 seconds. 9. 8. Chen's voice was steady to the end. No fear, no regret, just determination. 3, 2, 1. "See you on the other side, Shadow 7. The light that erupted from the hive structure was brilliant white. The modified EMP had worked beyond Chen's expectations, not just disrupting the node but overloading it completely. The explosion that followed consumed the entire structure and spread outward in a wave of energy that fried every Vrexian warrior within 5 kilometers. The hive mind died. After countless years consuming civilizations, it finally met something it could not understand, could not absorb, could not defeat. It met humanity. In the dropship, Jake Morrison watched the explosion fade. The rest of Shadow 7 stood around him in silence. They had completed the mission. They had saved the galaxy. But the victory tasted like ash. Lisa Martinez was crying quietly. Kyle Brooks had his head bowed. Danny Wright stared at nothing, his hands clenched into fists. They had lost one of their own, and the galaxy would learn what that cost had bought them. The memorial service was held on Meridian Prime, in the same Grand Assembly chamber where the Council had made their desperate vote 3 weeks earlier. But this time the chamber was filled with a very different energy. Representatives from hundreds of species stood in respectful silence as the humans of Shadow 7 entered. Jake Morrison walked at the front of his team, wearing his formal uniform instead of combat armor. The black fabric was decorated with medals and ribbons, markers of countless missions and battles. But his eyes were hollow, focused on the simple memorial hologram at the center of the chamber. Lieutenant Amy Chen's image rotated slowly, showing her in her combat gear, smiling with that confident expression she always wore. Below the image, text scrolled in dozens of languages telling her story. A soldier who had given everything to save a galaxy that had feared her people. The chamber was full. Commander Vextal was there, standing straighter than he ever had before. Ambassador Kelthera sat in the front row, her forearms folded in a gesture of mourning. And all around them, Representatives who had voted to keep humanity at arm's length now gathered to honor a human hero. But what struck Morrison most were the 14 survivors his team had rescued. They sat together in a special section, every one of them present despite their different species and worlds. They had insisted on coming, on bearing witness to what Amy Chen's sacrifice had meant. Morrison approached the podium. He had not slept since the mission. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard her voice counting down those final seconds. But he owed her this. He owed her the truth. "Lieutenant Amy Chen was my second in command," he began, his voice carrying through the silent chamber. She was brilliant, brave, and absolutely stubborn when she believed something was right. She saw patterns that others missed. She understood alien biology better than most xenobiologists, and she never, ever gave up on people who needed help. He paused, feeling the weight of every eye on him. When we found the survivors on Thesia 7, Amy did not hesitate. She wanted to save them even though it meant splitting our team and making our mission harder. When we reached the hive mind node, she knew what it would cost to destroy it. She made the choice to stay behind, not because she wanted to die, but because she wanted others to live. Morrison looked at the survivors. "She bought your lives with hers. She bought all of our lives, and she did it because that is what humans do. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We stand between the darkness and the innocent. We pay any price, bear any burden to do what is right." The elderly insect-like alien who had been among the survivors stood slowly. His translator had been repaired and his words came through clearly. "I am called Keeper Thex. I have lived for 87 cycles. In that time I believed many things about humans. I believed you were dangerous. I believed you were violent. I believed you were not truly civilized." He gestured to his fellow survivors. "We were wrong. When that monster broke through the wall, it was a human who stood between death and us. When we needed to cross dangerous ground, it was humans who carried our wounded. And when the choice came between mission success and our lives, a human chose to save us all at the cost of her own future." Thex looked directly at Morrison. "We owe our lives to Lieutenant Chen and to all of you. More than that, we owe you our understanding. Humans are not monsters from a death world. You are heroes forged by one." The chamber erupted in what could only be called applause, though it sounded different across so many species. Sounds of approval, gestures of respect, expressions of gratitude in 100 different forms. Commander Vextal approached the podium after Morrison stepped down. The proud reptilian warrior who had doubted humanity now stood with his head bowed. "Captain Morrison, I was wrong. I judged your people by my fears rather than by your actions. I have been a soldier for 30 years, and I have never witnessed the courage your team displayed." He straightened, meeting Morrison's eyes. "The Vrexian swarm has collapsed across all fronts. Without the central hive mind, the individual warriors are uncoordinated and easily defeated. Worlds are being liberated as we speak. Millions of lives saved, all because 5 humans were willing to walk into hell itself." Vextal extended his hand in the human gesture he had learned. It would be an honor to serve alongside humanity again. Morrison took his hand. "The honor would be ours, Commander." Over the following days, things changed rapidly. The Galactic Council held an emergency session and voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership. More than that, they requested formal military cooperation agreements. The galaxy had seen what human special forces could do. Now they wanted humanity as allies, not distant neighbors. Ambassador Kelthera met with Morrison privately in her quarters. She poured him a drink from a bottle of human whiskey she had obtained, a gesture of respect for his loss. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she spoke. "I never expected to like humans," she admitted. "I thought you would be cold, brutal, efficient, but without empathy. Instead, I find you are the most compassionate warriors I have ever encountered." Morrison sipped the whiskey. It burned going down, reminding him he was still alive. Earth taught us that survival alone is not enough. We had to learn to work together to care for each other, or we would have gone extinct long ago. That became part of who we are. And now the galaxy needs that strength. Kelthera looked out at the stars visible through her window. The Vrexian swarm was not the only threat out there. There are others. Dangers that we have been barely holding at bay. With humanity as true allies, we have hope of facing them. "How many teams like Shadow 7 does Earth have?" she asked. Morrison allowed himself a small smile. "We have 52 special operations teams currently active, and thousands of regular military personnel ready to deploy if needed. But more than that, we have a whole planet full of people who grew up on a death world and learned that the only way forward is together. Kelthera shook her head in wonder. The galaxy spent 50 years fearing you. Now I think we should have been recruiting you. 3 months later, the first joint training operations began. Human soldiers worked alongside alien troops, teaching them not just combat tactics but the philosophy that kept humanity alive on Earth. Adapt to your environment. Never give up. Protect your team above all else. And never ever leave anyone behind. Jake Morrison stood in the training facility on Meridian Prime, watching Kyle Brooks demonstrate proper heavy weapons techniques to a group of alien soldiers who looked both terrified and fascinated. Lisa Martinez was teaching communications protocols. Danny Wright was conducting marksmanship training. The rest of Shadow 7 had been offered promotions, positions training the next generation of mixed-species special operations teams. They had accepted because it was what Amy would have wanted. Her sacrifice meant something. It had brought the galaxy together. A young human approached Morrison. She was fresh from Earth, assigned to one of the new joint units. Captain Morrison? I wanted to meet you, sir. I read about Thesia 7, about Lieutenant Chen. That is why I joined, to make a difference like she did. Morrison looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. The same fire that had driven Amy. What is your name? Private Kate Foster, sir. Well, Private Foster, you have chosen a hard path, but it is a worthy one. We are not here to conquer. We are here to protect. We are here to stand between the darkness and those who cannot defend themselves. Can you do that? Yes, sir. I can, Morrison nodded. Then welcome to the fight. The galaxy needs more people like you, like us, like Amy Chen. He walked to the window overlooking the training grounds. More humans were arriving each week. More joint operations were being planned. The galaxy was changing, learning to accept humanity not as monsters to fear but as allies to trust. In space, the Terran Federation fleet grew larger. Human ships patrolled alongside alien vessels, protecting trade routes and colonies. When pirates attacked a convoy, it was a mixed human-alien crew that responded. When a natural disaster struck a distant world, humans were there with rescue teams. The reputation was shifting. No longer were humans seen as dangerous predators from a death world. Now they were known as the ones who showed up when things were impossible, the ones who never quit, the ones who sacrificed themselves for others. Years later, when historians studied the turning point in galactic civilization, they pointed to the defense of Thesia 7. 5 humans against an unstoppable swarm. 1 human who gave everything to save a galaxy that had never welcomed her people. Amy Chen became a symbol, not just of human courage, but of what the galaxy could be when different species worked together. Statues were raised in her honor. Ships were named after her. Young recruits from a dozen different worlds joined the military, hoping to serve with the same honor she had shown. And on Earth, in a small ceremony attended only by family and Shadow 7, a tree was planted in Amy's memory. It was a simple thing, just a sapling that would take decades to grow strong. But that was fitting. Amy had planted seeds too. Seeds of cooperation and understanding that would take time to fully mature. Jake Morrison stood by that tree, his remaining team beside him. They did not speak. They did not need to. They all understood what had been lost and what had been gained. The emergency beacon cut through the silent void of space like a scream. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, thousands of representatives from hundreds of worlds watched as the distress signal played across holographic displays. The voice that emerged was thin and trembling, translated through dozens of languages simultaneously. This is Administrator Tilith of the Virani colony, on Kelthera 7. We are under attack. The Kreth swarm has breached our outer defenses. We have 3,000 civilians. Our shields will fail in 72 hours, please. Someone help us. The chamber erupted in concerned chatter. The Virani were known across the galaxy as peaceful merchants and artists. Their hollow bones and delicate frames made them physically fragile, but their songs and craftwork were treasured by many species. The thought of them facing the Kreth, savage insectoid warriors who took no prisoners, made even hardened military representatives uncomfortable. Council Speaker. Vornith raised his many-jointed arm for silence. The amphibious leader's skin shifted through worried colors as he addressed the assembly. We have confirmed the authenticity of this transmission. The Kreth swarm has indeed moved into Sector 77. Intelligence suggests they are targeting isolated colonies for resources and territory. The Varani settlement is directly in their path. What are our response options? Asked Representative Kavaldir, whose crystalline form chimed with each word. Vornath consulted with his military advisors before responding. Our nearest fleet is 16 days away. Even with maximum acceleration, we cannot reach Kelthera 7 in time. The coalition forces are engaged in the Outer Rim disputes. The Sentinel Guard is on ceremonial duty for the Unity Festival. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Varani would be dead before help could arrive. Administrator Talith's holographic image appeared above them all. She was small even for her species, her feathered crest drooping with exhaustion, her three-fingered hands clasped together in the traditional Varani gesture of desperate plea. "Honored Council," she said, her voice cracking. "I understand the logistics. I know how far you are, but I am begging you. There are children here, families, artists and teachers and healers. We have never harmed anyone. We just want to live." Kvaldir's crystalline structure dimmed with sadness. "We do not have the capability. No species in this sector can deploy quickly enough. I am truly sorry." Tilith's face showed resignation, but then something changed in her expression. "A flicker of desperate hope I have heard. Rumors," she said carefully, "about a species that specializes in impossible missions. A species from a death world. They call themselves humans." The chamber's atmosphere shifted immediately. Hundreds of representatives began speaking at once, some with curiosity, others with clear discomfort. Vornath raised his arm again for silence, though his skin had turned a troubled gray-green. "The humans," he said slowly, "have been part of our galactic community for only 15 years. Their military capabilities are unconventional." Unconventional. Kvaldir's chime sounded sharp. "They are primitives who still use chemical propellants to throw metal projectiles at each other. Their medicine relies on cutting bodies open with blades. They eat the flesh of other creatures from their own world. They also," added Representative Shira, a tall being covered in protective plates, "have never lost a military engagement since joining the Council. Not one. Their soldiers volunteer to be shot at. They train by pushing their bodies to the point of collapse. They come from a world with gravity that would crush most of us, weather that changes without warning, and animals that hunt for sport. This is exactly why they should not be contacted," Kavaldir argued. "They are too violent, too unpredictable. What message does it send to rely on such primitives?" Tilith's voice cut through the debate. "It sends the message that you value our lives enough to try anything. Please, I am not asking you to like them. I am asking you to let me call them." Vornath looked around the chamber. He saw the discomfort on many faces, but also the shame. The Varani were members of the Council. They deserved protection, and the Council was failing them. "Very well," Vornath decided. "We will forward your distress call to Earth's Unified Defense Command. But Administrator Tilith, I must be honest with you. Even if the humans agree to help, I do not believe they can reach you in time. No one can move that fast." "Then I will die knowing someone tried," Tilith said quietly. The transmission to Earth was sent immediately. It included all the tactical data, the timeline, and a formal request for assistance. The Council expected the standard response protocol, acknowledgement of receipt within a day, formation of a planning committee, debate about resource allocation, and finally a response in 3 to 5 days. Earth's response came back in 14 minutes. Message received. UDCS Wolfhound already in position, 18 hours from Kelthera 7. Shadow Unit 7 deploying immediately. Expect boots on ground in 48 hours. Civilians will be extracted. Enemy will be engaged. Earth sends its regards. The Council chamber erupted again, this time in shock. Vornath read the message 3 times to be sure he understood correctly. "They are already moving?" Kvaldir's chime was high-pitched with disbelief. "Without debate? Without proper planning? Without even asking about compensation?" "Apparently," Vornath said, his skin shifting to colors no one had seen before, something between awe and fear. "The humans maintain rapid response vessels at strategic points throughout their territory. And they do not debate when lives are at stake." Shira leaned forward, her plates clicking with interest. 8 soldiers. They are sending 8 soldiers to face an army. 8 specialists, corrected Vornath, reading the detailed response that followed. "Captain Jake Morrison commanding. They call themselves Shadow Unit 7. Their record indicates, by the ancient waters, they have completed 47 missions in the last 2 years. Hostage rescue, counter-invasion, disaster relief, and what they call asymmetric engagement. What does that mean? Asked Kavaldir. Vornath's skin turned an even more troubled shade. It means they specialize in winning fights they should not survive. Administrator Tillith appeared in her holographic form again. This time she was not crying. Her crest had lifted slightly and something like hope showed in her large eyes. Thank you, Speaker Vornath. Thank you all. When will I meet these humans? According to their timeline, Captain Morrison's team will make contact with you in approximately 46 hours. Administrator Tillith, I must warn you, humans are not like us. They are larger, heavier, and far more physically aggressive than any species you have encountered. Try not to be frightened. Tillith managed a weak smile. Speaker, I am already facing an army that wants to kill every person in my colony. I do not think 8 soldiers can frighten me more than that. But even as she said it, she wondered if that was true. She had seen images of humans before. They looked like predators. Every one of them. And now 8 of their best warriors were coming to her world. Tillith did not know whether to feel relieved or terrified. She decided to feel both. Captain Jake Morrison was sleeping when the alert came through. The harsh beeping pulled him from dreams of his family's ranch in Montana into the red-lit interior of his quarters aboard the UDCS Wolfhound. He was awake and dressed in under 90 seconds, his body responding to years of training before his mind fully caught up. The briefing room was already full when he arrived. His team had beaten him there by 30 seconds. They sat around the holographic table, still rubbing sleep from their eyes but alert and ready. Jake felt the familiar surge of pride he always got looking at them. These were the best soldiers Earth had ever produced, and somehow they had all ended up under his command. Lieutenant Sophie Blake sat closest to the door, her red hair pulled back tight. She was reviewing something on her tablet, probably already running calculations for whatever mission they were about to receive. Next to her was Sergeant Danny Cruz, the team's medic, who could patch a wound under fire and quote poetry while doing it. Corporal Lisa Grant leaned back in her chair, her sniper rifle already partially disassembled for cleaning. She never sat still unless her hands were working. Corporal Kevin Hayes hunched over his portable computer station, fingers dancing across multiple screens at once. The other 4 members of Shadow Unit 7 filled out the room. Pete Logan, their heavy weapons specialist, Amy Chen, close-quarters combat expert, Ryan Brooks, communications and linguistics, and finally Chris Ward, their second-in-command and the person most likely to tell Jake when he was being an idiot. Morning, Captain, Chris said with a grin. Or is it evening? I've lost track out here. Does it matter? Jake replied, taking his position at the head of the table. We've got work. The hologram flickered to life, showing a star map with a highlighted system. Commander Patricia Vance's face appeared, broadcasting from Earth's Unified Defense Command. She looked tired, which meant she had been dealing with politicians. Shadow Unit 7, you have a Priority 1 mission. The Galactic Council has forwarded a distress call from a Virani colony, under attack by hostile forces designated as the Kreth Swarm. 3,000 civilians. Approximately 70 hours until their defensive shields fail. The Council's nearest response is 16 days out. Sophie whistled low. They want us to hold for 16 days? Negative, Commander Vance said. Your mission is evacuation. Get the civilians out, then extract yourselves. The Virani have transport ships but need time and security to launch them safely. Intel package is being downloaded to your systems now. Jake watched as data streamed across his tablet. Images of the Virani appeared. Small, bird-like creatures with hollow bones and delicate features. They looked like they would break if you looked at them wrong. Then came images of the Kreth. Insectoid, armored, roughly human-sized but built low to the ground. Their weapons were energy-based, their tactics straightforward and brutal. Terrain? Jake asked. Mining colony, mountainous region, 1.4 Earth gravity. Kelthera 7 has minimal atmosphere, breathable but thin. Temperature ranges are compatible with human operations. Local wildlife is minimal. Opposition numbers? Unknown. Estimates range from 500 to 2,000 Kreth warriors. They employ swarm tactics and have limited tactical flexibility. Kevin looked up from his computer. Translation? They're tough and mean but not particularly smart. Correct, Commander Vance confirmed. Corporal Hayes, you'll have full access to the colony systems once you arrive. Their technology is more advanced than ours in some ways, less in others. The Varani are not warriors. Their defensive weapons are mostly for show. Danny raised his hand slightly. Medical concerns? Varani physiology? Detailed medical data is in your package. Highlights: lightweight bone structure, dual respiratory system, sensitive to vibration and loud noises. They're fragile but resilient within their tolerances. Do not grab them firmly. Their bones will break. Use the specialized extraction harnesses Lieutenant Blake will prepare. Sophie was already making notes. How much prep time do we have? The Wolfhound is 18 hours out from Kelthera 7. You'll drop in 30 hours, which gives you 12 hours to plan and equip. Questions? Jake looked around the table. His team was already processing, already planning. Lisa was calculating firing angles from the terrain data. Pete was reviewing ammunition loads. Amy was studying Kreth anatomy for weak points. This was what they did. This was what they were built for. We'll get them out, Commander, Jake said simply. I know you will. One more thing, Captain. The Galactic Council is watching this closely. The Varani are well liked, and this is the first time we've been asked to respond to a council member's distress call. What you do in the next 70 hours will impact Earth's standing in the galaxy. Understood. We'll be professional. Commander Vance's expression softened slightly. I know you will. Bring them home, Jake. Bring yourselves home too. The hologram flickered off. For a moment, the team sat in silence, each processing what they had just heard. Then Chris spoke up. So 8 of us versus maybe 2,000 bugs, on an alien world. Protecting 3,000 civilians who will panic if we breathe too loud. And we have 70 hours. 68 now, Kevin corrected. Right, 68. Chris looked at Jake. Thoughts, Captain? Jake stood up, placing his hands on the table and looking at each member of his team in turn. Thoughts? We've done worse. Remember the Titan station evacuation? 1,500 civilians, hull breach in 3 sections, and those mercenary crews trying to shoot their way to the escape pods. We got everyone out. Most of everyone, Lisa said quietly. We lost 7, and we learned from it, Jake said. We learned what not to do. We learned how to be faster, smarter, better. That's why we're here. That's why Earth keeps us out on the frontier. Because when someone needs help and needs it right now, we don't debate. We don't form committees. We move, Sophie grinned. Damn right we do. All right, here's how this works, Jake continued. Sophie, you work on extraction harnesses and defensive preparations. Assume we'll need to buy time for those transport ships. Danny, study that medical data. You're going to be treating species you've never seen before. Lisa, Pete, terrain analysis and firing positions. I want to know every advantage we can squeeze out of that landscape. Kevin, crack their systems before we even land. I want control of anything electronic they've got. Amy, Chris, Ryan, work with me on the tactical plan. We need insertion, evacuation routes, and contingencies for when everything goes wrong. When, not if, Ryan asked with a slight smile. Always when, Jake confirmed. We plan for failure because that's how we prevent it. We've got 12 hours before drop prep starts. Use them well. The team dispersed immediately, each moving to their stations with practiced efficiency. Jake watched them go, feeling the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. 8 people, 8 soldiers against an army, and 3,000 lives depending on them getting it right. Chris hung back as the others left. You good, Captain? Jake nodded slowly. Just thinking about those Varani. They've probably never seen real combat, never had to fight for their lives, and now they're watching an army come at them with nowhere to run. That's why we're going, Chris said, because nobody else will get there in time. Because we can do what nobody else can do. Yeah, Jake agreed. Let's just make sure we actually do it. The Wolfhound continued its journey through the void, carrying 8 humans toward an impossible mission. In the cargo bay, equipment was being checked and rechecked. In the medical bay, Danny studied alien physiology with intense focus. In the armory, weapons were loaded and tested. And in the mess hall, someone had written on the board in bold letters, 68 hours. Let's make them count. Shadow Unit 7 was going to war, and the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The drop pods fell through Kelthera 7's thin atmosphere like meteors. Inside his pod, Jake felt the familiar violence of atmospheric entry. The shaking, the heat, the crushing deceleration that would kill most species but merely made humans uncomfortable. His suit's display showed the positions of the other 7 pods, all falling in precise formation toward their landing zone. "Sound off," Jake commanded through the comm system. 7 voices responded immediately, calm, despite the turbulence. Everyone was conscious, everyone was ready. The pods would land 5 kilometers from the Varani colony, far enough to avoid Kreth sensors, but close enough for a quick march. The plan was simple. Land under cover of darkness, conduct reconnaissance, then move in to make contact with Administrator Tillith. The pods hit the ground hard. Jake's training took over as he released the harness, grabbed his rifle, and blew the exit hatch. The thin air of Kelthera 7 greeted him immediately, along with the heavier gravity. It felt like wearing a weighted vest, noticeable but manageable. For a species adapted to lower gravity, this world would be exhausting. For humans from Earth, it was just another day. The landscape around him was rocky and barren, lit by the dim light of a distant red sun. Mountains rose in the distance, and between them, Jake could see the faint glow of the Varani colony. He could also see something else, the flashing lights of weapons fire. The battle had already begun. "Regroup, standard formation," Jake ordered. Within 3 minutes, all 8 members of Shadow Unit 7 had assembled at the rally point. They moved through equipment checks with practiced efficiency, then began their march toward the colony. Lisa took point, her sniper rifle scanning for threats. Kevin worked his portable scanner, mapping the terrain and looking for electronic signatures. The rest maintained a defensive perimeter around their heavier equipment. They covered the 5 kilometers in 40 minutes, moving fast but careful. As they got closer, the sounds of battle became clearer. Energy weapons hummed and crackled. Something that might have been screaming carried on the thin air, and beneath it all, a chittering noise that made Jake's skin crawl. The Kreth, Jake, and Sophie moved forward to a ridge overlooking the colony. What they saw made Jake curse under his breath. The Varani settlement was built into the side of a mountain, with protective walls that glowed with some kind of energy shield. But parts of that shield were flickering now, showing gaps. Through those gaps, insectoid shapes were pouring in. The Kreth were smaller than Jake expected, but moved with terrifying speed and coordination. They attacked in waves, falling back only to regroup and surge forward again. The Varani defenders were doing their best. Energy weapons flashed from defensive positions, and some of the Kreth fell. But for every one that dropped, 3 more took its place, and the defenders were clearly not trained soldiers. Their fire was panicked, uncoordinated. They were artists and merchants trying to be warriors, and it was not going well. "Okay," Sophie said quietly. "That's worse than the intel suggested." "How many Kreth?" Jake asked. Kevin checked his scanner. "I'm reading at least 800 signatures. Could be more behind that ridge to the east. And the colony shield? Failing. I give it maybe 10 hours before it collapses completely." Jake made the decision quickly. "We move in now. Lisa, find a position on that high ground to the north. Start taking out their command elements. Look for the bigger ones or any that seem to be directing others. Pete, Ryan, go with her and set up a support position. The rest of us are going in. Kevin, can you access their systems from here?" Kevin's fingers were already flying across his keyboard. "Give me 2 minutes." Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Jake watched the Varani line bend under another Kreth assault. He saw one defender go down, saw others drag the wounded back. He saw civilians running behind the defensive positions carrying what looked like children. Every instinct told him to move, to help, but he waited. Rushing in blind would just get people killed. "I'm in," Kevin announced. "I've got control of their mining equipment. There are automated lasers they use for cutting rock. I can retask them, do it. Turn them into gun turrets. Give our people something that can actually hurt these bugs. Already on it. Also, I'm opening a channel to Administrator Tillith. You want to say hi?" Jake switched his comm to the designated frequency. "Administrator Tillith, this is Captain Jake Morrison, Earth Special Forces. We're here to get you out. Can you respond?" There was a pause, then a voice came through, high-pitched and scared but trying to maintain control. "Captain Morrison? You are here? Already? 500 meters from your position. We're coming in. I need you to tell your people not to shoot at us. We're going to look different from anything they've seen." Yes, I will tell them. "Captain, the Kreth are everywhere. They just keep coming. I know. We're going to change that. Hold your position. We're moving now," Jake signaled to his team. Lisa, Pete, and Ryan broke off toward the high ground. The rest followed Jake down the slope toward the colony. They moved fast, weapons ready, and hit the Kreth from the side. The effect was immediate and devastating. Human rifles cracked in the thin air and Kreth began dropping. The insectoids turned to face this new threat, and that was their mistake. They were used to energy weapons that their shields could deflect. They were not used to solid projectiles moving at 3,000 feet per second. Jake's rifle kicked against his shoulder as he fired in controlled bursts. Next to him, Sophie's carbine made a steady rhythm. Danny moved between them, his medical pack bouncing but his rifle never stopping. Amy and Chris pushed forward on the flanks, cutting down Kreth that tried to circle around. From her position on the ridge, Lisa's sniper rifle boomed. Each shot dropped a Kreth from impossible distances. The aliens began to panic, their formation breaking as they tried to understand where the attacks were coming from. Kevin's commandeered mining lasers came online, sweeping across the battlefield with cutting beams that sliced through Kreth armor. The aliens retreated, chittering in confusion and rage. Jake and his team pushed through the gap in the shield and into the colony proper. Varani defenders stared at them with wide eyes, but Tillith's voice came over their comm system, speaking in her own language. Whatever she said, it made the defenders lower their weapons. Jake found himself standing in what looked like a town square. Varani civilians huddled in buildings or behind barricades, their feathered crests pressed flat against their heads in fear. They were small, maybe 4 feet tall with large eyes and delicate features, and they were looking at Jake and his team like they were monsters. Jake realized how they must appear. Humans were twice the height of most Varani, covered in armor and weapons, their faces hidden behind tactical masks. They moved with the confidence of apex predators, because that was exactly what they were. One Varani approached slowly, her movements hesitant. She wore what looked like official robes now stained with dust and blood. Her crest lifted slightly as she came closer. "Captain Morrison?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake pulled off his mask, knowing that seeing his face might help. "Administrator Tillith. It's good to meet you. I'm sorry it has to be under these circumstances." Tillith stared at him. Her 3-fingered hand came up, hovering near her face in what might have been a gesture of shock. "You are so large." "Yes, ma'am. We come from a heavy gravity world. It makes us look bigger than most species." Jake kept his voice gentle, the way he would talk to a scared civilian back on Earth. "But we're here to help. We're going to get your people out of here safely." "There are so many Kreth," Tillith said, her voice breaking slightly. "They just keep attacking. We thought we would all die." "Not today," Jake said firmly. "We've got a plan." "Your transport ships, can they fly?" "Yes, but they are slow. They need 18 hours to reach safe jump distance, and they have no weapons, no shields strong enough to—" "We'll handle the shields," Jake interrupted. "We'll handle the Kreth. You handle getting your people loaded and ready to launch. Can you do that?" Tillith looked at him, then at the other humans spreading through the colony. She saw Sophie already placing explosive charges at strategic points. She saw Danny setting up a medical station and treating wounded Varani with surprising gentleness. She saw Chris and Amy coordinating with her defenders, showing them better firing positions. "Yes," Tillith said, her crest rising higher. "Yes, we can do that. Good, we're going to hold this position for as long as it takes. No Kreth gets through us to your people. You have my word." Tillith made a gesture with her hands that Jake didn't recognize, but he understood the meaning. It was gratitude, hope, and a little bit of awe all mixed together. The Kreth would attack again soon. Jake knew that. But for now, the Varani had something they hadn't had before. They had hope. And they had 8 humans willing to fight for them.